So let me tell you a story that still gives me chills. In early 2024, a finance worker at a multinational company in Hong Kong got on a video call with his chief financial officer and several other colleagues. The CFO instructed him to make a series of wire transfers totaling about $25 million. The finance worker recognized the faces. He heard the voices. It looked like a completely normal Tuesday afternoon meeting. He transferred the money. Every single person on that call was fake. Every face, every voice, every mannerism was generated by artificial intelligence. $25 million gone because a human being trusted what his own eyes were showing him. And I want everyone listening to just sit with that for a second, because this is where we are right now. Not in 10 years. Now.
And that story is genuinely terrifying, I won't pretend otherwise. But I want to place it in a broader context, because I think the way we talk about deepfakes tends to lean toward the apocalyptic, and when we do that, we actually miss the more nuanced and in some ways more important conversation. The technology behind that Hong Kong scam is the same technology that allows filmmakers to de-age actors, so Robert De Niro can play a younger version of himself without it looking ridiculous. It's the same technology that powers real-time language dubbing so a Japanese doctor can give a lecture and it looks and sounds like they're speaking perfect English. The underlying capability is morally neutral. It is a tool, and like every powerful tool in human history, it can be used to create or to destroy. The question is whether we focus all our energy on fear or whether we channel some of it toward building the systems that distinguish one from the other.
Okay, but here is where I have to push back hard, because it's just a tool framing, while technically accurate, radically understates what is happening on the ground right now. This is not some theoretical debate about what bad actors might do someday. More than 90% of deepfakes currently in circulation are non-consensual intimate imagery. 90%. We are talking about real women and girls whose faces are being stitched onto explicit content without their knowledge, without their consent, and having it distributed across the internet. This is not a future problem. This is a right now, today, happening at scale, ruining lives catastrophe. And I think any conversation about this technology that doesn't start there is fundamentally unserious.
You're right, and I want to be clear that I am not minimizing that reality. It is horrific, and it demands an aggressive legal and technical response. But I also think that if we frame the entire deepfake conversation around the worst uses, we end up paralyzed instead of productive. So yes, let's absolutely talk about the harms, and let's talk about the solutions, because there are real solutions being developed right now that give me actual hope.
Let me take you to Slovakia, September 2023, 3 days before a national election. An audio recording surfaces online of one of the leading candidates apparently discussing how to rig the election and buy votes. It spreads everywhere. People are outraged. The candidate denies it, says it's a fake, but here's the problem. In those final 72 hours before the vote, there was no way to definitively prove it was fabricated in time. The news cycle moved on. People voted with that audio rattling around in their heads, and the candidate lost. Now, we may never know whether that deepfake swung the election, but the fact that we have to ask that question at all should scare the life out of every person who cares about democracy.
And it does scare me. Let me be honest, the election manipulation potential is probably the single scariest application of this technology, and I don't have a clean answer for it. But I want to complicate the picture a little, because I think the threat to democracy is actually more subtle and in some ways worse than the obvious fake audio clip. Picture this, it's 2028. And real footage surfaces of a political figure doing something genuinely corrupt, caught on camera, undeniable. Except now it is deniable because that politician just points at the screen and says, "That's a deepfake." And a significant chunk of the population believes them because we now live in a world where anything can be faked, which means anything can be denied. Researchers call this the liar's dividend. And I think it might actually be more dangerous than the fakes themselves, because it doesn't just create false realities, it destroys our ability to agree on true ones.
And that is exactly my point. You just described a world where reality itself becomes optional, where any inconvenient truth can be waved away with 2 words, it's fake. That is not a small problem that clever technology can solve. That is a foundational crack in the bedrock of how democratic societies function. We need shared facts to govern ourselves. We need to be able to point to a video, a recording, a document, and say this happened. If we lose that, we don't just lose trust in media. We lose the ability to hold anyone accountable for anything, ever. And I honestly don't know how you put that genie back in the bottle.
So let me tell you about a bottle that some very smart people are actually building right now, because I refuse to end this on pure despair. There's a standard called C2PA, Content Provenance and Authenticity, that is being developed by a coalition including Adobe, Microsoft, Intel, and major news organizations. It works kind of like a digital chain of custody. When a photo is taken, the camera cryptographically signs it at the moment of capture, recording where it was taken when on what device. Every edit made to that image is logged. So when you see a photo online, you can check its provenance, its entire history from camera sensor to your screen. It doesn't tell you what's fake, but it does tell you what's verified. And I think that distinction, shifting from is this fake to is this authenticated, is the right framework for rebuilding digital trust.
That's a promising technology, and I genuinely hope it works. But let me bring us back to something you acknowledged a moment ago that I don't think we can move past quickly. Let me tell you about a teenage girl, a real girl, whose story has been reported in the news. She goes to school. She has social media like every other kid. She posts normal photos of herself at the beach, at prom with her friends. And one day she discovers that someone has taken those photos and used AI to generate explicit images of her. Fake images, but with her real face, completely indistinguishable from real photographs. They're being shared among classmates, posted on websites, sent to people she knows. Her life is shattered. She is 14 years old. Now multiply that by thousands, because this is happening everywhere to girls and women across the world. And the tools to do it are free. They take about 30 seconds to use, and there is almost nothing the victims can do about it.
And I want to be very careful here, because I don't ever want to sound like I'm rationalizing what you just described. That is abuse, full stop. It should be prosecuted aggressively, and laws are being written right now in multiple countries to make the creation and distribution of non-consensual deepfake intimate imagery a serious crime. But I also want to acknowledge an uncomfortable truth, which is that this isn't entirely new. Before deepfakes existed, people were already creating and distributing non-consensual intimate content. Photoshop has been around for decades. Revenge content has been a plague on the internet since the internet existed. What AI has done is dramatically lower the skill barrier and increase the scale, and that does make it qualitatively worse, but the underlying problem is one of human behavior and legal enforcement, not just technology.
See, that argument drives me up a wall, and I'll tell you why. Yes, bad people have always done bad things, but there is a massive difference between a world where creating a convincing fake requires hours of skilled Photoshop work and a world where a 13-year-old can download an app and generate hundreds of photorealistic fakes in minutes. Scale matters. Ease matters. When you make destruction effortless, you get a lot more destruction. And telling the victims, well, this kind of thing has always happened, is cold comfort when their lives are being torn apart by a technology that did not need to be made freely available to everyone on the planet with no safeguards whatsoever.
I agree with you on the safeguards point, genuinely. I think the open source release of some of these models without any guardrails was reckless, and the companies that did it should face real consequences. But I also think we need to grapple with the reality that the cat is out of the bag. These tools exist, they're in millions of hands, and a blanket ban would be about as effective as banning people from using calculators. The technology is too simple, too distributed, and too easy to replicate. So while we absolutely need stronger laws and we absolutely need platforms to invest heavily in detection and removal, we also need to accept that the ultimate solution isn't going to be preventing the creation of fakes. It's going to be building systems that make fakes identifiable and that rebuild the trust infrastructure that deepfakes have eroded.
Here's the thing though, and this is what makes me genuinely pessimistic. You talk about detection and authentication, and those are real efforts being made by serious people. But we are in an arms race where the offense will always be ahead of the defense. Every time someone builds a better deepfake detector, someone else uses that detector as a training signal to build a better deepfake. It's an adversarial loop with no end point. And meanwhile, the damage is measured in human lives. Every day that the detection isn't perfect is a day when another woman finds fake images of herself online. Another election gets poisoned by fabricated audio. Another company loses millions to a forged video call. Telling people to just wait, the authentication technology is coming, is not an answer when the bleeding is happening now.
And I won't pretend the arms race isn't real because it is, but I want to offer a different way of thinking about it. In the early days of the internet, something like 90% of web traffic was pornography. People said the internet was irredeemable, that it would be nothing but a sewer of the worst human impulses. And obviously that was wrong. Not because the bad stuff went away, it didn't. But because the legitimate uses grew so enormous that they overwhelmed the dark corners. Email, commerce, education, communication, entertainment. The positive uses didn't eliminate the negative ones, but they built an ecosystem where the good dramatically outweighed the bad. I think synthetic media will follow the same trajectory. Right now we're in the early, chaotic, disproportionately harmful phase, but the infrastructure of trust is being built. C2PA adoption is growing. Platforms are investing billions in detection. Laws are being passed. It's messy and it's slow, but it's happening.
I hear you, and I want to believe that parallel, but the internet analogy actually proves my point more than yours. It took us 25 years to even begin to seriously regulate the internet. And in those 25 years, the damage was incalculable. Social media has rewired children's brains. Misinformation has fractured democracies. Privacy has been strip-mined for profit. Yes, the internet also brought wonderful things, but the idea that we should be patient and let the ecosystem mature, while people's lives are being destroyed in real time, is a luxury that the victims of this technology cannot afford.
Fair, and I think the honest answer is that there is no clean solution. We are not going to regulate our way out of this completely. We are not going to build technology that makes fakes impossible, and we are not going to change human nature overnight. What we can do is pursue all three simultaneously, pass strong laws with real teeth, invest massively in authentication infrastructure, and yes, work on changing the culture so that creating and sharing non-consensual content carries real social consequences, not just legal ones. It's imperfect and it's slow and it won't save everyone. But it's the only realistic path I can see, and I think pretending there's a magic bullet is more dangerous than admitting the fight will be long and hard.
So here is where I want to land on this one, and I think it's actually pretty stark. We are at a moment where seeing is no longer believing. That is a sentence that sounds like a cliché, but it represents the most fundamental shift in human epistemology since the invention of the camera. For all of human history, if you saw it with your own eyes, it was real. If it was captured on film, it happened. That assumption is now broken, and it is not going to be unbroken. Every institution that depends on visual or audio authenticity, journalism, the legal system, elections, personal relationships, every single one of them needs to be rebuilt from the ground up for a world where any image, any video, any voice can be fabricated in seconds. That is not a technology problem. That is a civilizational challenge, and I do not think we are remotely ready for it.
And I actually agree with almost all of that, which might surprise you. Where we differ, I think, is on the question of whether this is unprecedented or whether it's the latest chapter in a very old story. Every major communication technology has destabilized trust. The printing press enabled mass propaganda. Photography could be manipulated from the very beginning. Radio gave us War of the Worlds panic and political demagogues. Television was going to rot everyone's brains. Each time we eventually built the literacy, the institutions, and the norms to navigate the new reality. It was never fast enough, it was never painless, and the transition periods were genuinely awful. But we adapted because that's what humans do. I believe we will adapt to this too, not because I'm naive, but because I have studied enough history to know that despair has never been a useful strategy.
I hope you're right. I genuinely do. But I want everyone listening to understand the stakes. The next time you see a video of a politician saying something outrageous, you will not know if it's real. The next time someone shows you a photograph that seems to prove something, you will not know if it's real. And the next time a teenager's face shows up in images that were never taken, the technology that made it possible will be free, easy, and everywhere. We are living in the last generation of humans who grew up trusting their eyes. Our children will not have that luxury, and we owe it to them to build something better than what we have right now, because right now what we have is a disaster in slow motion.
Then let's build it. Not by trying to uninvent what's already here because that's a fantasy, but by pouring everything we have into authentication, into legal frameworks, into digital literacy, and into the hard, unglamorous work of rebuilding trust in a world where trust has to be earned differently than it was before. The age of believing your eyes is over. The age of verifying what you see is just beginning. And I'd rather be at the start of a new chapter than mourning the end of the old one.
As long as we actually write the new rules before the damage becomes permanent, because some of it already is.
Then we'd better get started, no more time to waste.